In a previous video we showed how to solve linear equations with Excel. Now we're going to move on to nonlinear equations. Okay, so sets of nonlinear equations with Excel. So linear equations, all constant coefficients times the variables. Nonlinear equations, let's say we have something like 3x minus 9 equals 0, but we've squared this now and made it nonlinear. We know how to solve that. X squared equals 9 divided by 3, or x equals plus or minus square root of 3. Okay, so we know how to solve that for simple equations, but as soon as we start moving on to more complex equations, we may want to use numerical techniques to solve these instead of rearranging the variables. So let's do just an example problem in Excel. So let's say we had x squared plus y squared equals 20. Okay, so that's the equation of a circle, and it's about 4.5, a radius of about 4.5, square root of 20. Okay, so there's my circle, and then let me add another equation as well. So let's say y equals x squared. Okay, so that's going to be just a parabola. Okay, and we want both of these to be satisfied. Okay, so if we know how to plug this in, if we just plug this in right here and then solve for y, or for x, for example, then we can solve for y. We could figure out, this intersection point and that intersection point as well. Okay, so we know how to do that analytically, but let's talk about how to do this with Excel. Let's come over to, let's go ahead and open up Excel. And we're going to go ahead and just use Solver for this. So this is an Excel Solver. I'll go ahead and just maximize that. Make a blank workbook here. Okay, I'll make this just a little bit larger. Okay, so we have maybe variables, and I'll say this is x and y, and let's just give them some guess values. I'll just give them guess values of 0, and then we also have equations. Okay, so I'll just write some equations here. X squared plus y squared equals 20. Okay, and then another one which is y equals x squared. Okay, so there's a second double click there on the column separator just to get it to expand. So I'm going to just make these, rename this as x just so it's a little bit easier to see the equations, and I'll rename this one as y. Okay, so there's y, and actually I needed to hit enter there. Okay, hit enter to get it to change the name of that cell, and then when I come over here I can do x squared plus y squared minus, I'll just put x squared plus y squared. Okay, and that equals 0. Okay, now I'm going to rearrange this one to be just a little bit different. I'm going to rearrange this one to be y minus x squared equals 0. Okay, just to be able to show, I'm going to put this in as what's called a residual form, y minus x squared. Okay, so that equals 0 as well. Okay, so I want this to equal 20 and this to equal 0. So let's open up the solver. So if you come to data, you'll see the solver on the right hand side. If you don't see that there, if you don't see solver there, it means you need to add it. So come over to file, and then come over to options, and then select add-ins. Okay, so you'll be able to see the solver add-in, and then click go, and then just make sure solver add-in is checked, and then click OK. And then you'll come back to data and then be able to see the solver dialog box here on the right. So if you click it, it'll open up this dialog box, and we need an objective function. So this is meant for solving optimization problems. Let's just create a objective function here. and I'll just say this is the sum of all the equations. You know what? I'm going to change this one to, so it's going to be equal to 0 at the solution. So I'll just set that minus 20 right here, x squared plus y squared minus 20. So when we know we've found a solution, it's when the sum of all the equation residuals equals 0. Okay, so there we have. That's going to be our objective, that we're going to try to minimize that. Okay, set it to equal to 0 actually. Okay, so we'll set the objective to a value of 0, and what we're going to do is change the cells. These are the ones that the solver can change, and so if you just select these, it'll say B3 to B4. Okay, now we have to have some constraints here as well. So let's go ahead and add a couple constraints. So this cell reference right here, we want that to be equal to 0. Okay, so there's our first one. And let's go ahead and add another one as well. So go ahead and add one more constraint, which is that this cell right underneath it also has to equal 0 when we finish finding a solution. So click OK. So we have, we're going to change the x and y values, and we're subject to these constraints. We're going to try to set our objective to 0. One other thing to note is that you can find alternate solutions. In this case, you're going to have two different solutions to this problem, but you can restrict the x and y values to be non-negative or positive, so that you restrict it just to one solution. So I'm going to go ahead and click Solve, and it said it found a solution. You can look at answers, sensitivities, limit reports, for example, and then click OK. Okay, so it found a solution. It said that x equals 2 and y equals 4. You can see a little bit of, just up here, you can see that it's really close, but these solvers, they're iterative and they have a convergence tolerance, so it's not going to be exactly 4, but fairly close. Okay, and then you can see that these are approximately equal to 0 as well. Okay, so for an extension to this, what I want you to try on your own now is to try to add another equation to this problem. So add another variable, which is going to be z. Okay, that's just a third equation. And it's going to be z plus 5 equals x times y. Okay, so practice that. Just add that to these other three equations and see if you can solve those with Excel. So go ahead and push pause now. Okay, so let's just wrap this up. We'll add, just go ahead and insert a row right here. What we're going to do is just add this additional equation, which is going to be, I'll just go ahead and write it here, z plus 5 minus x times y, and that's going to be equal to 0. Okay, and then also need to create a new variable z, give it a guess value. I'll just start with 0 in that case. Let me go ahead and rename it as well. So I'll rename that as z. And then equals z plus 5 minus x times y. Okay, so you can see that it's not equal to 0 right now, so we're going to need to find the solution. We'll go ahead and just change all the values of x, y, and z. Okay, so I'll change these back to 0 just to start with guess values of 0. Let me go ahead and open up my solver dialog box. All those other equations are still there, but instead of just changing B3 to B4, what we're going to do is change also B5. Okay, so there are those three, and let me add one more constraint. Okay, so this value in E5 is going to be set equal to 0. Okay, and everything else is the same. Let's go ahead and see if it can solve it. It says it found a solution. All constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied. Okay, so the values were the same for x and y, and z came up with a value of 3. Okay, so that concludes this tutorial on equation solutions and on nonlinear equation solving.